The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, casting golden rays across the breakfast room where Prince William sat with his steaming cup of tea. The newspaper lay folded beside his plate, untouched. His mind was elsewhere, consumed by worry that had been growing for weeks. Kate entered the room quietly, her silk robe wrapped tightly around her slender frame. The usual brightness in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a shadow of concern that seemed to follow her everywhere these days. "Any word from the hospital?" Kate asked, settling into the chair across from William. Her voice carried a tremor she couldn't quite suppress, no matter how hard she tried to maintain her composure for the children. William shook his head, running his fingers through his hair. "Nothing since yesterday evening. The doctor said they needed more time to review the test results." He paused, meeting her gaze. "Father looked so frail when we visited him last week. I barely recognized the man who used to take me fishing at Balmoral." King Charles had been battling health issues for months now, though the exact nature of his condition remained closely guarded by the royal medical team. What started as routine checkups had evolved into lengthy hospital stays, multiple specialists, and hushed conversations in palace corridors. William and Kate had tried to shield their children from the gravity of the situation, but George, Charlotte, and Louis were perceptive. They noticed the whispered phone calls, the canceled engagements, and the way their parents' smiles never quite reached their eyes anymore. Kate reached across the table, her fingers intertwining with William's. "Remember what he told us last month? About wanting to see the children grow up, about all the plans he had for modernizing the monarchy?" Her voice broke slightly. He was so hopeful then, so determined to fight whatever this was. The weight of unspoken fears hung heavy between them. Both understood that if Charles's condition worsened, their entire world would change overnight. William would ascend to the throne much sooner than anyone had anticipated, and Kate would become queen consort while still trying to raise their young family. The thought terrified them both, though neither dared voice it completely. Their private secretary, James, knocked softly on the door before entering. His usually composed demeanor showed cracks of strain. "Your Royal Highnesses, I'm afraid I have news from the hospital. The King's medical team has requested an urgent meeting this afternoon. They've asked that both of you attend, along with Queen Camilla." William felt his stomach drop. Emergency meetings were never good news. "Did they give any indication of what this is about?" James shifted uncomfortably. "I'm afraid not, sir. They simply emphasized the urgency and requested complete privacy. No staff members, no security detail in the room during the consultation." Kate's face went pale. She had attended enough royal engagements to understand the subtle language of palace protocol. When doctors requested such privacy, it usually meant they were about to deliver news that could shake the very foundations of the monarchy. "What time?" she managed to ask. 3 o'clock, ma'am, at the London clinic." After James left, William and Kate sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The breakfast grew cold, forgotten. Kate found herself thinking about her children's innocence, how they still believed their grandfather would recover and return to his duties. George, at 11, was just beginning to understand his future role, but he wasn't ready for the weight of destiny to fall so heavily on his young shoulders. William's mind raced through scenarios, each more daunting than the last. He thought about his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, and how she had carried the crown with such grace and dignity for over 70 years. Could he possibly measure up to that legacy? Was he ready to be the steady hand the nation needed during uncertain times? "We need to prepare for anything," Kate finally said, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. "Whatever they tell us this afternoon, we have to be strong. For Charles, for the children, for each other." William nodded, drawing strength from her resolve. "You're right. We've faced challenges before, and we've come through them together." But even as he spoke the words, he couldn't shake the feeling that this challenge would test them in ways they had never imagined. The hours crawled by painfully slow. Kate tried to maintain normalcy by helping Charlotte with her homework and listening to Louis practice piano. William attempted to focus on state papers, but The words blurred together on the page. Both found themselves watching the clock, dreading the approach of 3 o'clock, yet desperate to finally know what they were facing. As they prepared to leave for the hospital, Kate caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked tired, older somehow than she had just weeks ago. The stress was taking its toll, carving new lines around her eyes and stealing the natural glow from her complexion. She applied makeup carefully, knowing that photographers would be watching their every move, analyzing their expressions for any hint of the royal family's private struggles. The drive to the London clinic felt endless despite the short distance. Their police escort cleared the way efficiently, but each red light felt like an eternity. William held Kate's hand tightly, both drawing comfort from the contact. Neither spoke, but their shared silence conveyed more than words ever could. They arrived at the hospital's private entrance, where Queen Camilla was already waiting. Her usual composure was strained, and William could see the fear in her eyes despite her attempt to appear calm. The three of them embraced briefly, understanding that whatever lay ahead, they would face it as a family. Dr. Richardson, the king's primary physician, met them in a small consultation room away from the main hospital corridors. His grave expression immediately set William on edge. The doctor was a man who had delivered difficult news to royal families for decades, but today he seemed to struggle with finding the right words. "Your Majesties, your Royal Highnesses," he began formally, then paused to gather himself. "I'm afraid the latest test results have revealed some concerning developments in His Majesty's condition." Kate felt her heart begin to race. She gripped William's hand tighter, preparing herself for the worst possible news. Camilla leaned forward slightly, her knuckles white as she clasped her hands together. "Dr. Richardson continued, his voice measured but heavy with implication. "The cancer has progressed more rapidly than we initially anticipated. What we discovered in the recent scans has changed our entire treatment approach and, unfortunately, our prognosis timeline." The word cancer hit William like a physical blow. While they had suspected something serious, having it confirmed in such stark terms made it real in a way that previous vague medical discussions had not. He felt the room spinning slightly, his mouth going dry. "How long?" Camilla asked quietly, her voice barely audible. Dr. Richardson's hesitation spoke volumes before he even answered. "Based on current progression rates and the specific type of cancer we're dealing with, we're looking at months rather than years. Possibly 6 to 12 months, though that could change depending on how well he responds to the new treatment protocol we're implementing." The silence that followed was deafening. Kate felt tears welling up in her eyes despite her efforts to remain composed. This was Charles, the man who had welcomed her into the family with open arms, who had walked her down the aisle when her own father couldn't, who had become not just her father-in-law, but a true mentor and friend. William's mind immediately went to practical concerns, a defense mechanism against the emotional tsunami threatening to overwhelm him. What does this mean for his duties? For the monarchy's schedule? "We'll need to significantly reduce his public engagements," Dr. Richardson explained. "The treatment will be aggressive, and he'll need to conserve his strength. There may be periods where he's unable to perform any official duties at all." The implications were staggering. If Charles couldn't fulfill his role as king, William would need to step in as regent, effectively taking on the responsibilities of the crown while his father was still alive. It was a constitutional complexity that hadn't been seriously considered since George III's illness over 2 centuries ago. As they left the hospital that afternoon, the three of them walked in stunned silence. The London streets bustled with normal life around them, but William and Kate felt disconnected from it all, as if they were viewing the world through glass. People went about their daily routines, unaware that the monarchy they had known their entire lives was about to change forever. Back at Kensington Palace, the weight of what they had learned settled over them like a heavy blanket. They would need to tell the children something, though they hadn't yet decided how much truth their young minds could handle. They would need to inform other family members, coordinate with palace officials, and begin preparing for a future none of them had wanted to face so soon. That evening, as Kate tucked Charlotte into bed, her daughter asked innocently, "Mummy, when will Grandpa Charles feel better? I want to show him the painting I made for him." Kate's heart broke a little more. "Grandpa is very sick, darling," she said carefully, "but we're going to make sure he knows how much we love him, no matter what." As she kissed Charlotte goodnight, Kate wondered how many more innocent questions like this she would have to answer in the coming months, and how she would find the strength to protect her children's hearts while her own was breaking. 2 weeks had passed since the devastating diagnosis, and the royal household had transformed into something resembling a war room. Papers scattered across William's desk detailed constitutional procedures, succession protocols, and emergency contingency plans that no one had hoped to need. The Prince of Wales found himself thrust into roles and responsibilities he had expected to assume decades in the future, not in the prime of his 40s with young children still needing their father's attention. Kate stood at the window of their private sitting room, watching George kick a football across the palace gardens with his security detail. The sight should have brought her comfort, but instead it reminded her of how their children's carefree childhood was about to end. George would soon learn that his destiny was approaching faster than anyone had planned. The weight of the crown, which had seemed like a distant future responsibility, now loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. "The Prime Minister will be here within the hour," William announced, entering the room with a stack of briefing papers. His face showed the strain of sleepless nights spent reading constitutional law and historical precedents. "We need to discuss the transition of duties, and apparently there are some complex legal questions about the regency arrangements." Kate turned from the window, her expression thoughtful but troubled. "Have you spoken to your father today?" The question came out more strained than she intended. Every conversation with Charles now carried the weight of borrowed time, each word precious because they didn't know how many more conversations they would have. "This morning, he's insisting on maintaining as much of his schedule as possible for now." William's voice carried a mixture of admiration and frustration. "The doctors have advised complete rest, but he's determined to fulfill his duties for as long as he can. Camilla says he spent 3 hours yesterday reviewing state papers, even though the treatment left him exhausted." The courage of King Charles in facing his illness head-on both inspired and worried his family. His determination to serve until the very end was noble, but it also meant he wasn't taking care of himself the way he should. The royal physicians had been clear that stress and overwork could accelerate the disease's progression, yet Charles seemed unable to step back from his responsibilities. Dr. Richardson had called that morning with an update that sent chills through both William and Kate. The king's condition had deteriorated more rapidly than even their worst-case projections had suggested. The aggressive treatment was taking a toll on his body that was becoming visible to anyone who saw him. Palace staff had begun whispering about how frail he looked, how his clothes seemed to hang loosely on his diminishing frame. "We need to start preparing George," Kate said quietly, the words feeling like a betrayal of her son's innocence. "Not everything, not yet, but he needs to understand that changes are coming. He's already asking questions about why Grandpa Charles looks so tired all the time." William sat heavily in his armchair, the weight of impending kingship already bowing his shoulders. "I keep thinking about my grandmother, about how she managed to carry this burden with such grace. But she had decades to prepare, decades to grow into the role gradually. We're being thrown into deep water with no time to learn how to swim." The comparison to Queen Elizabeth II was inevitable but painful. She had been a constant, steady presence for over 70 years, a symbol of stability that the nation had taken for granted. William knew that he and Kate would be measured against that legacy from their very first day, and the prospect was overwhelming. Kate moved to sit beside her husband, taking his hand in both of hers. "Your grandmother also faced unexpected challenges. She became queen younger than planned, during a time when the world was changing rapidly. But she had something that will carry us through this too." "What's that?" William asked, though he thought he knew what she would say. "Love. Love for the country, love for the people, love for each other. That's what made her great, not constitutional knowledge or royal protocol. That's what will make us capable of this too. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sir Edward, the king's private secretary, whose usually impeccable composure was showing cracks. "Your Royal Highnesses, I'm afraid there's been a development." His Majesty collapsed during his meeting with the Archbishop of Canterbury this afternoon. He's been taken back to the hospital for emergency evaluation. Kate's heart stopped. The word collapsed echoed in her mind like a death knell. William was on his feet immediately, his face pale but determined. "How serious is it? Is he conscious?" "He regained consciousness quickly," Sir Edward assured them. "But the doctors are concerned about his blood pressure and want to keep him under observation. Her Majesty the Queen Consort is with him now." The drive to the hospital felt like déjà vu, but this time the urgency was different. This wasn't a scheduled consultation with carefully prepared mental defenses. This was a crisis that had erupted without warning, shattering any illusions they might have maintained about having time to adjust gradually to their new reality. They found Camilla in the family waiting area, her usual perfect composure replaced by raw fear. She looked older than her years, worn down by weeks of watching a man she loved fight a battle that seemed increasingly unwinnable. When she saw William and Kate, she stood to embrace them, and for the first time since the diagnosis, she allowed herself to break down completely. He was in the middle of discussing the Christmas service arrangements. Camilla sobbed against Kate's shoulder. He was so animated, so passionate about making sure everything was perfect for the congregation. Then he just went white and collapsed. "The doctors say it's the cancer affecting his blood chemistry." Dr. Richardson appeared with the grim efficiency that medical professionals develop after years of delivering difficult news. "Your Majesties, His Majesty is stable for now, but this episode represents a significant turn in his condition. The cancer is affecting multiple systems now, not just the primary site we've been treating." William felt the walls of the hospital corridor closing in around him. What does that mean in practical terms? It means the timeline we discussed previously may have been optimistic. We're now looking at weeks to months rather than months to a year. And his ability to maintain any regular schedule is essentially over. He'll need constant medical supervision. The words hit like physical blows. Kate found herself gripping the back of a chair to steady herself. Weeks to months. They had been mentally preparing for a gradual transition over the better part of the year. Now they were facing the possibility that William might become king before Christmas. "Can we see him?" Kate asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Richardson nodded. "He's been asking for both of you. But please, try not to let him see how distressed you are. His mental state is crucial right now, and he's already blaming himself for what this will mean for the family." They found Charles propped up in his hospital bed, surrounded by the sterile efficiency of modern medical equipment. He looked impossibly small against the white sheets, his skin taking on a translucent quality that made him appear almost ethereal. But his eyes, when they met William's, still held the spark of determination that had defined his entire life. "My dear boy," Charles said, his voice weak but warm, "I'm sorry to have given everyone such a fright. I was hoping we'd have more time to prepare you for all of this." William approached the bedside, fighting to keep his emotions in check. "Don't apologize, Father. You have nothing to be sorry for. We're going to handle whatever comes next, together." "Kate, my dear," Charles smiled at his daughter-in-law. "You look tired. I hope this isn't keeping you from the children too much. They need their mother, now more than ever." Kate leaned down to kiss his forehead, her heart breaking at how fragile he felt. "The children are fine. They're worried about you, but they're strong. They're sending you their love and dozens of drawings to decorate your room." Charles chuckled weakly. "Lewis's dinosaurs, I hope. Those always make me smile." They talked quietly for nearly an hour, carefully avoiding discussion of the implications of his condition. Charles asked about state matters, about upcoming engagements, about the children's school activities. It was as if he was trying to maintain normalcy through sheer force of will, to pretend that this was just a temporary setback rather than the beginning of the end. But when visiting hours ended and they had to leave, the pretense crumbled. Charles gripped William's hand with surprising strength. "Take care of them," he whispered. "Take care of the country. Take care of the family. Take care of Kate and the children. You're ready for this, even if you don't feel like you are." Driving home through London's evening traffic, William and Kate sat in contemplative silence. The city lights blurred past their windows, millions of people going about their evening routines, unaware that their future king was facing the most challenging moment of his life. "We need to tell the children tonight," Kate said finally. "If word of today gets out, and it probably will, they shouldn't hear about it from someone else." William nodded reluctantly. How do you explain to an 11-year-old that his childhood is about to end? That everything he thought he understood about his future has just accelerated by decades? "The same way your parents explained it to you when you were young," Kate replied. "With honesty, with love, and with the promise that no matter what changes, family comes first." That evening, they gathered their 3 children in the family drawing room at Kensington Palace. George sat with the serious expression he wore when he sensed important conversations coming. Charlotte curled up next to Kate on the sofa, while Louis fidgeted with his toy cars, too young to fully grasp the gravity of what was happening. "We need to talk to you about Grandpa Charles," William began carefully. "You know he's been sick, and today he had to go back to the hospital because he's not getting better the way we all hoped." George's face immediately grew more serious. "Is he going to die?" he asked with the direct honesty that only children possess. Kate felt her throat tighten, but she managed to answer. "The doctors are doing everything they can to help him feel better. But his illness is very serious, and it might mean that Daddy will need to take on more of Grandpa's responsibilities sooner than we expected." "You mean you'll be king?" George asked, his voice small and uncertain. "Maybe, sweetheart. We don't know yet, but we wanted you to understand that some things might change in our family. But no matter what happens, Mummy and I love you very much, and we're going to take care of you through everything." Charlotte looked up at Kate with worried eyes. "Will we still live here? Will I still go to the same school?" "We'll figure all of that out together," Kate assured her. "Right now, the most important thing is that we're a family, and we take care of each other." That night, after the children were finally settled in their beds with extra hugs and reassurances, William and Kate sat in their bedroom, facing a future that seemed to be rushing toward them like an avalanche. The weight of the crown, once a distant responsibility, now felt immediate and overwhelming. "Are we ready for this?" William asked, voicing the fear they both carried. Kate was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I don't think anyone is ever truly ready to be king and queen. But we love each other, we love our children, and we love this country. That will have to be enough to start with. The rest we'll learn as we go." Outside their window, London slept peacefully, unaware that the future of the monarchy was being decided in the quiet conversations of a family facing an impossible situation with nothing but love and determination to guide them forward. The autumn leaves were falling gently outside Windsor Castle when Dr. Richardson made the call that would change everything. It was a crisp October morning, and Kate was helping Louis with his reading when her phone rang with the tone reserved for urgent family matters. William was in a meeting with constitutional lawyers, preparing for what everyone now knew was inevitable. But the timeline had remained uncertain until this moment. "Your Royal Highness," Dr. Richardson's voice was gentle but grave. "I'm afraid His Majesty has taken a significant turn for the worse overnight. We believe it would be best for the family to come to the hospital as soon as possible." Kate felt her heart stop. The words every family dreads hearing, delivered with professional compassion, but devastating nonetheless. "How long do we have?" she managed to ask, though her voice came out as barely a whisper. "It's difficult to say precisely, but we're talking hours rather than days. His Majesty is comfortable and conscious, and he's been asking for Prince William specifically." After ending the call, Kate sat motionless for several minutes, staring at the phone in her hand while Lewis continued reading aloud beside her, blissfully unaware that his world was about to change forever. The weight of what she had to do next felt overwhelming. She needed to find William, gather the children, notify the necessary officials, and somehow prepare for the moment when her husband would become king. She found William in his study, surrounded by constitutional documents and succession protocols. His face went pale when he saw her expression, understanding immediately that the call they had been dreading had finally come. Without words, he stood and pulled her in his arms, both of them holding onto each other as if they could somehow stop time itself. "We need to go now," Kate whispered against his shoulder. "And we need to take the children. They should have a chance to say goodbye." The journey to London felt surreal. Their police escort moved through traffic with the efficiency reserved for emergencies. But inside their car, William and Kate tried to explain to George, Charlotte, and Lewis why they were leaving their planned day behind a rush to see Grandpa Charles. George, now 12 and increasingly aware of his position, asked the question that neither parent wanted to answer. "Is Grandpa dying today?" William met his eldest son's eyes in the rearview mirror. The boy deserved honesty, even when that honesty was heartbreaking. "We don't know exactly when, George, but yes, Grandpa is very sick, and today might be our last chance to tell him we love him." Charlotte began crying silently, understanding enough to be frightened, but not enough to fully comprehend what was happening. Kate reached back to hold her daughter's hand, fighting her own tears to remain strong for her children. Lewis, only 7, seemed confused but picked up on the emotional weight in the car, growing quieter with each mile. They arrived at the London clinic to find Camilla already there, along with Princess and Prince Edward. The family had gathered with the same instinctive urgency that draws people together in life's most crucial moments. Camilla looked exhausted, having spent the night by Charles's bedside watching him struggle with increasing difficulty to breathe. Dr. Richardson met them in the familiar consultation room, but this time his message was different. "His Majesty is comfortable, and we've made sure he's not in pain. His breathing has become more labored, but he's alert and has been asking for each of you by name. I should warn you that he looks quite frail, but his mind is clear." They entered Charles's room one family at a time, giving each person private moments to say goodbye. When it was William and Kate's turn, they brought the children with them, understanding that this might be their last chance to see their grandfather alive. Charles was propped up in bed, oxygen tubes helping him breathe, but his eyes brightened when he saw his family enter. "My darlings," he whispered, his voice barely audible but filled with love. "Come here, all of you." The children approached tentatively, frightened by the medical equipment, but drawn to their grandfather's familiar warmth. Charles managed to smile as Lewis showed him a drawing he had made of dinosaurs wearing crowns, which made the dying king laugh despite his weakness. "George," Charles called to his eldest grandson. "Come close, my boy." George approached the bedside with the gravity of someone much older than his years. Charles took his hand with what little strength he had left. "You're going to be a wonderful king someday," he whispered. "But for now, just be a wonderful boy. Help your father, listen to your mother, and remember that being royal means serving others, not being served by them." George nodded solemnly, tears rolling down his cheeks as he tried to be brave for his grandfather. Charles turned to Charlotte and Lewis next, telling them how proud he was of them, how much joy they had brought to his life, and how he would always be watching over them. The innocence of their responses broke everyone's heart. Charlotte promised to paint him more pictures, and Lewis asked if heaven had dinosaurs. Finally, Charles looked at William and Kate, his eyes conveying all the love and pride that words could never adequately express. "You will be magnificent," he told them. "Both of you. This country is so fortunate to have you, and I am so proud to call you my son and daughter." William leaned down to kiss his father's forehead. "Thank you for everything, Dad. For teaching me what it means to serve, what it means to love, what it means to be a good man. I promise I'll take care of everyone, including your beloved Camilla." Kate was crying openly now, no longer trying to maintain her composure. "Thank you for welcoming me into this family with such love," she managed to say. "Thank you for showing me what royal duty really means, and for being such a wonderful grandfather to our children." They spent the next several hours taking turns sitting with Charles, sometimes talking quietly, sometimes just holding his hand in comfortable silence. The king drifted in and out of consciousness, but whenever he was awake, he seemed to find peace in having his family around him. As evening approached, Charles's breathing became more shallow. Dr. Richardson gently informed them that the end was near. The family gathered around his bed, Camilla holding one hand while William held the other. The children sat close by, finally understanding that they were witnessing something profound and sacred. King Charles III died peacefully at 7:23 p.m., surrounded by everyone he loved most. His last coherent words were, "Take care of each other," spoken so quietly that only those closest to him could hear. The moment of death was followed by a silence that seemed to stretch into eternity. Then, almost immediately, the weight of what happened next fell on everyone's shoulders. William was now king, whether he felt ready or not. The constitutional wheels had already begun turning automatically. Notifications to the Privy Council, coordination with the government, preparation for the formal proclamation. Sir Edward appeared within minutes, having waited respectfully outside the room. His words, though expected, still felt shocking in their finality. "Your Majesty," he said to William, using the title for the first time, "I'm deeply sorry for your loss. When you are ready, there are several immediate constitutional requirements we need to address." The transformation was instantaneous and jarring. William was no longer the Prince of Wales. He was King William V. Kate was no longer the Princess of Wales. She was Queen Catherine. Their children were no longer simply royal grandchildren. George was now the heir to the throne, directly in line to one day with the crown himself. The journey back to Windsor Castle that night was conducted with a full ceremony due to a king and queen. Police motorcycles led the way, flags were lowered to half-staff, and crowds had already begun gathering outside the palace gates despite the late hour. News of Charles's death had spread with modern speed, and the nation was already mourning their king while simultaneously welcoming their new monarchs. Inside their car, however, William and Kate felt anything but royal. They felt like a family in grief, trying to comfort their confused and saddened children while grappling with responsibilities they had hoped to have years more to prepare for. George asked questions about what being the heir meant now that his father was king. Charlotte wondered if they would have to move away from Kensington Palace. Louis fell asleep against Kate's shoulder, exhausted by emotions he couldn't fully understand. "Are you ready for this?" Kate asked William quietly as they approached Windsor. William looked at his sleeping son, his anxious daughter, his serious eldest child, and his wife who had stood by him through everything. "I'm not sure anyone is ever ready to be king," he replied. "But I'm ready to try, especially with you beside me." The next few days passed in a blur of constitutional procedures, funeral preparations, and the elaborate ceremony of a new monarch taking the throne. The Accession Council met to formally proclaim William as king, and for the first time, he spoke to the nation as their sovereign, promising to serve with the same dedication his father had shown. Kate struggled with her new title and responsibilities, but she found strength in the knowledge that she was continuing a legacy of royal women who had faced similar challenges. She thought often of Queen Elizabeth II, of how she had navigated the transition from princess to queen with grace and determination. Kate drew inspiration from that example while forging her own path as a modern queen in a changing world. The children adapted with the resilience that young people possess, though George in particular seemed to age years in just days as he began to understand the weight of his future destiny. Charlotte and Louis continued their schooling, but with additional security and the knowledge that their family was now the symbol of the nation itself. A month after Charles's death, as William and Kate stood together on the balcony of Buckingham Palace for their first official public appearance as king and queen. They reflected on how much their lives had changed. The man who had been a father, mentor, and friend was gone, but his legacy lived on through everything he had taught them about service, duty, and love. He would be proud, Kate whispered to William as they waved to the crowds below. Yes, William replied, his voice steady with new confidence. He would be proud, and he would remind us that this is just the beginning. We have a lifetime of service ahead of us. As they stood there, representing continuity and change, tradition and modernity, the new king and queen understood that while their world had indeed collapsed with Charles's death, they had built something new from the pieces. Something stronger, something ready for the challenges ahead, something worthy of the love and trust of a nation they now served. The crown had passed, as it always does, but with it came the eternal promise that the monarchy would continue to evolve, to serve, and to endure, carried forward by two people who had discovered that love, family, and duty could overcome even the most overwhelming challenges life could present.